Hey, welcome everyone to the Game Dev Discussion Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Alex Beddoes. And this week, I have been meaning to get you on for so long, but we have Vincent Dérozier, the senior materials artist at Eidios. Man, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks a lot for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here.
Wanted to get you. We've spoken a lot over the past year where we've kind of just talking about each other's materials, where we see stuff go up and just talking about the medium in general. And I've been wanting to get you on for so long. It's been a bit of a scheduling nightmare because I took a break from the podcast today. It's okay, we've got stuff on here. So I'm glad the stars aligned and we're able to organize this. Now I need to get your take on something on a pretty dark day for all material artists out there. What's your thoughts on the new Substance Designer logos? What do you reckon? Good, bad, ugly, like it, hate it?
Oh, I'm so neutral about it, as I used to know the first logos, even the logo before it all started. I think I'm using Designer since maybe 6 or 7 years, so I saw the logo change quite a while. I'm sad a bit to lose the warm color, but honestly, I've been using the cloud from Adobe since a while now, so I'm okay to be able to see my logo in the middle of all of theirs. So I have no issue with that. And I'm very old, so I know how to change an icon for software. So if I really have some issue about that,
I'm just wondering, the other thing that's been weird is just getting used to looking at my taskbar and I've got if I have Lightroom open, Photoshop, Unreal Engine, whatever else. It's just getting used to design is pretty quite easy to spot. The colors are still quite distinctive. It's just my muscle memory and my habit of looking down and I'm gonna stare at it for a split second. I'm like, where the fuck is my? It's that one.
Yeah,
I've got it's gonna take some time.
Honestly, I'm still losing maybe 2 seconds per day because but I'm not crashing that much with Designer or Painter, so I'm not restarting it that much. If that was Maya, I think I would be maybe not really happy, but it's pretty stable. So, but I saw the rant on Twitter and all of that. But honestly, I think it's just anytime something is changing, people are complaining.
Yeah.
So, but I'm okay with it.
I'll be honest as well. We're just on Designer and Crash and stuff. It's it's been pretty stable for me. Anytime it's crashed, it's very obviously my own fault. I'll open a 4K graph, which is I've been super unoptimal with, and I'm double clicking to try and get the thumbnail to render, and I'm and it'll crash, and I'm you know what, I can't be when I'm using Maya or 3ds Max. And that crashes, you're why the fuck did you just crash? I did nothing.
Yeah.
Why are you crashing? Designer, every time I'm okay, that's my fault. I screwed up. Sorry, guys. Have you had a chance to test out any of the new features in Designer?
So far, I just played a little bit with it. I saw a lot of potential, but I didn't didn't took enough time, I would say, to do something very useful. And I think I'm still missing some few tools just to be able to say, okay, I'm doing something that is, for example, basically tiling inside the modeling tools, and that I can reuse very easily. Obviously the scattering, the physical simulation is really cool. It's a very cool adjustment, but I'm still waiting on few tools. We discussed about that, but I'm pretty sure they are going to game up in the next month with a very cool tool by themselves or from the community. But
I wouldn't be surprised because we were speaking off air this sort of procedural modeling. Also, Houdini were kind of the first there. And Houdini. I was speaking to some of the guys yesterday about this. It's such a big software. It's a Swiss Army knife of a software. It could do nearly everything, but also it is super heavy. It's not the most user friendly thing. It's pretty hard on your system. But I'm seeing a lot of people kind of put their marker on their version of procedural modeling. So like Designer have theirs, Blender have their version. Adam's been putting stuff together with Polygon Flow. So it's like everyone's sort of like trying to get their version of procedural modeling kind of in front of people and using it. And I think it's the right thing. I think because you're right as well. Like I haven't looked into it a great deal. I saw Javier Perez playing with it a bit, and I'm like, I'm seeing what I expected some cool things, but like in terms of this actually being in my pipeline to make a game, it's like there's stuff missing to make this work. But I kind of expected that. Like, okay, we'll get it out there so everyone's talking about it and get people kind of like just aware that this is here, and we can refine over time, which I think is a smart move by them.
But obviously, I don't think they want to compete with Houdini, for example, that have been, like you said, like here for quite a while, and that is like very powerful and more complex because of that. But just the only fact that you can like just drag and drop a 3D mesh inside Designer, for me, that's enough. You know, they just made my day just with that. So I'm happy with that. And obviously, when you have something, you want more. So I'm like waiting for even more feature now. But just having that, I think I was like waiting for that for like maybe 5 years or so. Because every time someone is starting inside Designer, they are like, how can I just like drag and drop a mesh, you know, and just make it move, or just have some kind of like, you know, the shadow box, at least in ZBrush. And I think with that, we like have the door that is like starting to open. So it's cool. It's like, it's an amazing update they just made. And even just for the in terms of performance, I was so happy to be able to open Painter and see everything load so fast.
Yes. I don't know how they do that, dude. That's crazy. Like, Painter gets better and faster. I'm always just like, man, I remember when I was in like 2015, 2014, and this thing was hard. Like, you know, 2K and like with a few layers, and suddenly I'm like, I'm now chugging. I want to load a smart material. Okay, now you're gonna wait like 5-6 minutes. It's been really, really impressive. And actually with Designer as well, one of the nice update, like it's a real quality of life update for me, is the ray tracing iridescence node, because all my graphs now, I leave a PBR render node with like a really neutral skybox plugged in and neutral colors, so I could like kind of see top down just how my material reads with some 3D deformation, because then you can press the space bar and like see how it tiles with light information, which, you know, when you look at it in a 3D view, or sorry, just the albedo or just a height map, and you press the space bar to see if it's tiling, it's like, it can be deceiving, because once you get some lighting in there, it's like, oh, okay, this is really obvious. But now you can use the ray trace node, which looks incredible, and it's just like, I can just leave that node in my graph all the time. It's pretty lightweight and it looks really good. I'm like, okay, I can constantly see how my shit looks like without needing to set up a PBR node every time.
Yeah, I love that node. When it appeared, I was like very exciting. When I think I just had to poke Nicolas Wehrman, because at some point I wanted to do something, and he was like, you know, we just made a render node. You know, it's like it's the wizard from Adobe. He's just like making always like crazy node quietly, and I just found that so useful that at the end, I think my drop for Adobe, all my renders were made inside that. Because I just found that very, like, you know, robust and useful. It was inside the software, like you said, and I was like, okay, I just have a graph with all my render. It was basically like a render farm for everything. So I just love it.
Nicholas is great, because he came on the podcast, and I remember I was moaning about some stuff, because I was like, I want something like in Marmoset, you know, I drag a point light round, and he's like, yeah, we have that, like sphere light, and it's the exact same. And I was like, is it? And I opened it up, and I was like, oh wow, okay, cool. And with this update as well, like I didn't realize they had like line lights, planar lights, like all these sorts of, and I didn't know they were in there. So I was like, I messaged Nicholas like, oh hey, like great addition with all these different light types, because I've been using sphere lights for this whole time. And he's like, nah, they've been in for a while. I'm like, oh shit, I just didn't know then, because for all of my renders have always been PBR render node with just like a series of sphere lights to get a look. But now I know there's plane lights, because I love rectangle lights in Unreal Engine. Like, they're so fun to use. You get such nice effects. Now we can do that in Designer. It makes me very happy.
Yeah, I think you are like me. You are not like checking the documentation like every week.
No.
You are just playing with the node and all of that. But
I wait to see other people do stuff. I'm so late. Like, like when you ask me, like, oh, have you checked out the modeling tools? It's like, not too much. I'll wait to see what other people do, and then I'll be like, okay, maybe I'll check this out.
I understand. I'm the same, and at the same time, it's normal. They are doing so much stuff at the same time. Their team is like, it's not like, I don't think they are like 1,000, but they are very productive. So they are like doing stuff all the time. So it's really hard to be up to date most of the time. That's why I'm trying to poke Nicolas Weirman as less as possible, because every time I'm like asking a question, he's like, yeah, it's just right there. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry.
The only one we couldn't solve, because so when I'm using it's the only reason I would use a marmoset, because there's some materials that just don't work, is because it's all ray matching in the PBR render node. It still uses a sphere with poles, so like everything gets pulled up to a point. Whereas when I use marmoset, I use this spherifized cube, so all of the material doesn't pinch at the top and bottom. And I was poking about. I was like, hey, like, this is almost perfect. Like, could you have like this? And it's like, it's really hard to do because that doesn't really work in ray matching. And it's like, shit, okay. Like, it's the only feature which I'm like, PBR and I'll uninstall marmoset tomorrow if I could get like a spherifized cube as my preview mesh in PBR render node. But you know what, like, that team's ridiculous. Like, I imagine I say that, it's like Nicholas is probably going to DM me after this and be like, actually, like, that's already, we're working on that. It'll be there next update. And I'm like, oh shit, I was doing podcast mode. But I want to just dive. So anyway, that's Designer. I've spoken at great length about Designer on the podcast. I think I've had nearly most of the material artists I know in this industry I've had on. But with you, there's something that was quite interesting. Like, you spent the best part of a decade at Ubisoft, and I mean, we're doing realism. I mean, realism in the sense of game art realism. But in your most recent title, super stylized. Like, it is a complete shift. And the thing that I found interesting about that was, it's one thing for an individual artist to like kind of adopt or try a new style, you know. But a whole studio, like, having to adopt this whole new style, and I imagine this could be like workflow changes when using Designer and all this sort of stuff. You guys managed to get a really aesthetically pleasing, and also most of it pretty much all done in Designer. I'm right in saying there's not much like ZBrush scoops going into a lot of the materials I was seeing. So it's like you're getting a really distinct style without using ZBrush from a team which has, for the most part, been, you know, all of the, you know, realism for over a decade. Like, just talk a bit about that. Like, what were some of the challenges? Was it easier than you expected? Like, how did that come about? Like, for you personally, what was it like, the experience for you to like go from, like I said, all of these Assassin's Creed games in that style to like now this very stylized fantasy?
Honestly, it was quite a challenge, but not that much in terms of like shifting the team from one to another. Maybe it's I'm going to say something. I'm going to piss off a lot of people, but I don't see that much difference between working on something realism and stylized for many reasons. The first reason is that stylized, it's like so broad. You know, it's when even if you are saying, okay, let's do a game in Disney style, which one? You know, like The Sleeping Beauty or Aladdin, or is it like, I don't know, the Lion King? All of those, they are like so different in terms of art direction, material definition, lighting, shape language, and all of that. And I think even for realism production, it's the same. Now, about the team, especially we had on the production, I was very lucky. I only had senior and experienced artists that already work on a few stylized production. Like, we had Jimmy that worked on like many Pentelli games, that was the same for Pierre, Olivier as well. We hired Dimitri that work on Dishonored. So basically, we just had all of it. Even on the Biome team, Claude and Caroline, they already work on production like that. So the main goal was more like, what do we want to produce and how do we want to achieve it? So what we did technically, we just keep the pipeline we had and try to find solution inside it. Personally, just for me, like as an individual artist, I have some kind of classical artistic base. I have a conceptual draftsman degree. So for me, something stylized or like realistic, it's just a matter of shape language and the amount of detail and how you use them, in terms of rhythm and all of that. So the idea was just, okay, what do we want to achieve? The main goal was for us to try to match, and we already knew at first that it was impossible, but it was one of the targets to try to have a Ghibli vibe in the material and in the final image. It was not something original because we are like everyone, we love Ghibli background and all of that. And it was working for us because they are very grounded and kind of realistic in a lot of ways. If we were talking about like art, they are etude doc, like study, like realism study, the background of Ghibli. So it was easier for us to move from like something like Assassin's Creed to that. And then we were like, okay, how do we approach that in the reality? Like me, I would like use some watercolor on the underlayer and maybe like redraw some shapes with opaque painting and stuff like that. So I was just trying to match that mindset inside Designer, and it worked quite well because Designer, it's just basically a Photoshop with a nodal interface. So you can pretty much do everything you want. So no, it goes quite good. I was very lucky because the team was amazing. And as I said, we just had like very great experienced artists. So the transition was easy. I think we just like took maybe 3 months of like experiencing things before starting to have something we were happy with. So it was cool.
What did you guys have to establish any kind of like artistic rules or principles? And what I mean by that is like, you hear like any of the sort of No Mon talks from the Sony Santa Monica team and the environment team, and they'll talk about, we intentionally had low detail normals and albedos, so the scoops, like the scoop macros stand out, or like we had a tighter color range. We didn't use high dynamic ranges much because we wanted this like almost retro color palette. Did you, when you're with Designer, like, because obviously it can be quite methodical, like, if I work out this pipeline and we stick to these rules, we can get this an equal result at the end of each step. Did you guys establish any of them sort of rules, like when you're putting together like now we've worked out how to do this, we have to replicate this across 100 materials? What kind of rules did you have to set in place for that?
In terms of materials, for Immortals, but it was the same for Assassin's Creed Odyssey, we start with benchmarks, and when we were happy visually with those, we just bring down things about like what was working and what was not. So it was really helpful to lay down some rules, like it's really important to keep that visually in your material, for example, and avoid this kind of detail. Because as I said, when you say stylized, it could mean like anything for anyone. And it's the same. If I was saying like, let's do something Ghibli, it doesn't mean anything. I mean, the neighbors, Yamada, visually, the art direction is completely different from Princess Mononoke, which is again different from Porco Rosso. They have like a very big, broad palette of styles, even though they have a very specific touch, obviously. But it was really cool to choose and to say, okay, Moving Castle was very cool for us because it was very colorful, modern, but still very grounded. So we were like, okay, let's pick that one to go back to this one in terms of shape language and detail and all of that. and then we just lay down some rules, for example, to have a reduced color palette. So the idea was like, it's like in classical art. I think it's my watercolor teacher that teach me this one. It was like, don't use like too much colors. Try to keep one color for each element and stay in something with good complementary color inside the object. And then you have the lighting on top of it. And basically it's how we are doing the image in a video game. So it was one of the rules, for example. As I said, we took a look as well as how they are like painting their background in a Ghibli movie. They use specific colors that are called poster color. They are very cheap and they are very specific because they allow you to go very like a watercolor and then go back on top of it with opaque brushstroke. It's really cool because you can't really do that that easily with gouache, for example, or with oil painting or watercolor. So it really impacts the style. So it was one of the discovery we made in pre-production. So it was really important for us. It was translated to like, it's important to have an underlayer that is feeling aquatic and then redraw some stuff with outbrush stroke and stuff like that. So all of that becomes visual pillars for all the material.
There's a question. You mentioned the like you have a traditional art degree. How does a guy with a traditional art degree end up in such a techie like art style medium, which is substance designer? You know, designers like nodes and tech and like graphs.
Oh yeah, I ate it. I just hated it. At first, I didn't want it to go inside it, but I discovered designer with two of my colleagues in France back in, I don't know, 2014, 2013, something like that. They were like that independent underground company that was coming to the studio. I think that was Seth Deguy and Jerk maybe that came, but well, yeah. So basically, I use it at first to like just to be able to manage 100 textures. It was a big amount for me, like 7 years ago, to manage that in Photoshop. And when I realized I was able to, you know, just automatize some step, I was like, okay, it's really cool. For me, that was just that at the beginning. On Unity, I just mainly use Designer like that and created few material with procedural stuff, like 100% procedural, but most of it was a patchwork of photo. The scan didn't exist at this time, and ZBrush grab, Z-grab. Yeah, so very classical. But for me, it was like very mind-opening on Unity because I was like, just for me, designer is like, I don't know if you're maybe not familiar with Dragon Ball. In the series Dragon Ball, you have the time room, like in the sky, in the
hyperbolic time chamber.
Yeah, and for me, second designer, it is just that, you know, because in art, iteration and, you know, fail and try, it's like it's the secret to learn and to be better. And for me, just like they don't did it on purpose, I guess, but just, you know, the UI and the thing that you are like doing everything in a non-destructive way. It's for me, it's like it's a time room. You know, I'm like going so much faster and learning so much faster inside it, just in terms of rhythm, shape, and color and all of that. It just helped me a lot, like many years ago, to see what was wrong with my stuff and what was working as well. So it's how I start with it from an artistic background.
It's you know what I find interesting. You say like the Z grab was like the old school. It's kind of come full circle. Like it's gone. Everyone was so up on the procedural hype train, and now it's like, you know what? I like the handcrafted element of a ZBrush sculpt. I know you've seen you. I mean, I've been looking at it a lot recently. I know I've seen you doing it as well. And I thought I had this conversation. It was at the View conference last year. We were talking about stylized versus realism on a panel, and there was an interesting point that came up, which was we've had Klaus and like Into the Spider-Verse. Why were they so like crazy successful? And I think the audience at large, and I mean, and in this particular case, I'm talking about the art industry, but you become desensitized to it. Like, you know, we've had the whole of the noughties was nothing but CGI, Transformers, and the Avengers, and all this sort of stuff. And when we got this really raw, and I think that's why Ghibli is so popular, because you get this raw, artistic essence. Spider-Man, you know, Into Spider-Verse, all the rules they follow to stick to like really traditional animation rules, skip framing, all of that sort of stuff to get certain styles. It resonated with people because it's like I've been so desensitized to like crazy cool CGI, no matter how realistic it is. And I'm wondering if the similar sort of thing is happening with artists, where it's like I've seen materials I'm talking about here mainly, but it's like I've seen 100% design, I've seen what you could do with it. And they just see the ZBrush scopes. I mean, the ones you did, the stylized ones, are super satisfying to look at. But any of these sorts of materials, just like it's almost like a breath of fresh air to have that artistic element to it, and the detail that you get out of a scope is very hard to get out of a 100% designer graph. I think people, it's really resonating with people. I think people really enjoy it. I think people like seeing it, and I think it is an element of, you know, just, you know, like I said, being a bit desensitized to that procedural look. So just have a look, I find. All of that, anything that's fully procedural is like, you can kind of, there's an uncanny thing about it, a gamey look to it that makes me go, that's a procedural material. In fairness, the only guy who I see whose materials don't have that sort of gamey look is Ben Wilson's, and I think that's to do with the way he renders. I mean, they're amazing materials, but he renders in a certain way where like feels more like a scan than a procedural material. But we've kind of come full circle. People like are more and more using ZBrush grabs in Designer.
Yeah, it's so new.
It's so frustrating because when I was doing Designer, I was super dumb with it. I was like, oh, if I'm not doing 100% Designer, I'm cheating. I'm not doing this properly. And it went until Ben slapped me. It was like, you know, dude, use whatever you need to do to make good materials, especially in production. Like, you know,
I think that's okay. Especially in production. I totally agree with Ben on that. It's like, and that was the same on Odyssey. That was the same on Immortals. When I was talking with the guys on the floor, I was like, why do you want to do, for example, that pebbles like in hours in Designer to have that very procedural feeling when you can just like sculpt it in like few minutes in ZBrush and do a Z-grab? And most of the time we were just doing that, except when the guys were like, I really want to try it in a procedural way. It's okay sometimes like to try to discover a new thing and all of that, but it's like, that's why I love our job. It's like, for me, it's not just technical or artistic. We are more like artisan. We are using a lot of tools, and I just love that. But obviously, every tools have their limitation. You can sculpt something in Blender right now, but before that, we were able to do some kind of stuff in Max or Maya, but there is a lot of limitations. So it's better to go in ZBrush. And honestly, in ZBrush, I love a lot of the features, but the procedural noise and all of that, I just prefer that kind of surfacing inside Designer or inside Painter. For me, there is obviously a feeling and a limitation to like everything. It doesn't mean that you can just stick to one software if you love it or if you want to try, you know, to have new challenges. But you have to be aware to sometimes just take a step back and be, okay, am I doing that to win some time? Because obviously I'm like the first one, like guilty on Odyssey. I just did like almost everything inside Designer in terms of sculpting, because I was really much more faster in that, because I was like creating generator and all of that. And with the range of kits we have to do, I was not able to like sculpt everything from the ground up. I would have loved that because I prefer to sculpt inside ZBrush. But I was like, in terms of production, it makes more sense. But most of the time, if it's like stupidly more long, like 10 times longer to be in Designer, I will just move inside ZBrush or Max or whatever.
Honestly, I am so done with the whole like any of this 100% design. I mean, like I said, I was guilty of this for a long time, but like just seeing the speed of what you can get by like doing the macro stuff in like either Blender or ZBrush, like either simulations or raw sculpt, and just using a bunch of scans and like just blending a bunch of scan data together and then using that as your noise to like layer on top. I'm like, I'm getting 90% of the way there in what? Few hours, and you're like, yo, I'm nearly done. I just need to push that 10% out. Versus, I've got to spend oh god, any of the 100% design materials take me like over a month to like, just because it's such a slog as well when you're doing everything 100% designer. It can be a real slog, like when you're trying to figure out issues or anything like that. And now I'm like, if I can get 90% of the way there in a day, I'm like, and it looks pretty cool. Like, you know, I said sculpt data, sculpt like does that like kind of visual language. It has a very distinct look compared to like procedural.
But you know, if I'm going to say something horrible, but if I'm faster in Photoshop, I'm going to go in Photoshop. You know, I'm going to paint something in Photoshop and import it inside Designer, cater it, and then go back inside ZBrush or maybe inside Painter, depending on the context and the material. But I don't care. I just want to, you know, it to look good, and I'm having fun as well in Photoshop, like painting and all of that. So obviously, I think it's like, I totally understand the, you know, the race of like, I want to be 100% designer. And obviously there is a lot also of pro about that. For me, the main production or the only production I saw a 100% workflow like that, and it was so efficient, was maybe The Division, where Josh Lynch worked as a lead material, and they just had like so much generator for so much stuff, like the patina, the cracks, the layering, the macro noise, and all of that. And it make a lot of sense. But again, it was a matter of context. For that production, it was like very, very smart. Now, is it a good way for you at home, all your material, few material here and there, and all your production? Depends. And I think you don't have to feel bad to not do like everything inside design or 100 procedural, you know.
It's a context is a very important word. Like this came up a while ago. Like there was a few artists like in the land that is Twitter, artist Twitter. Is like it. People were like moaning about like, oh, people get so excited about like, you know, who cares about this? 100%, you modeled everything in design art. It means nothing. And I'm like, you need to understand why the person's making something 100% design art. Like great example of this piece, one like Jonathan Bananas, his Viking scene, or some of his other stuff. It's like, is he in any way suggesting this is a game art pipeline? No. It's like when you do something like that, you're flexing, you're showing how much control you have over the software to create these scenes. Like, look how much I know the software, and I can create these cool scenes. And that's it. It's you showing your understanding. Now, where this has come up in the past, where it's like, okay, this really needs to be clarified, it's been with students. Like, you see students, and me being one of them, like, I see Jonathan Bananas doing everything in 100% designer, and I'm not understanding the context of why he's doing that. So then I'm like, okay, I need to do everything like that. And I've had a lot of the guys I've been mentoring recently. It's been the exact same conversation. I'm like, why do you want to do this in designer? Well, I don't know. That's what you do, isn't it? And I'm like, no, like, there's bullshit. We're making games. Like, the context of why you do things like that is super important, because it gets lost. Like, and the meaning of why that piece of art is created gets lost. It gets misinterpreted, and then like, you know, there's misinformation spread. And it's like, you know, it's very important. Like, you have to be very aware of what you're looking at when you look at a piece of art. Like you said, with context, like, oh, okay, The Division, this game where they're making a whole of New York or a whole of Washington. You need to be real fucking efficient with that game. Like, you can't hand sculpt every concrete in an entire city. Like, you just can't. So that context is super important, like, which is missed most of the time. Most conversations I see in Discord, on social media, with one-to-one conversations, the point is nearly always missed. Like, oh, I've like Jonathan example. Oh, well, he made like his sword and shield and all that sort of stuff in like 100% design, I guess I have to do that. Or vice versa. Like, oh, Danny Carlone sculpts most of his materials. Like, oh, I have to do it like that because that's how he does it. And I'm like, context, reasons why, like, it's super important.
It's like, I think most of the time when I'm like giving feedback to people online, I'm always starting to ask, okay, so what are you doing? Like, why and what is your target? Where is your reference? And so then you can ask the person, like, do you think that tool or that way to go there is the best? And at the same time, I totally understand people are like, the vision they have of the video game industry is not like they can like know everything and how it works in like every studio. So the feeling they have are like they can just understand the video game industry production from sadly what they saw on ArtStation, which is like a great platform, but it has a lot of I would say not negative effect, but it's like giving a false view and a false vision of some production. For example, like you said, if you're just like looking at material or like stuff that are like just here to flex or like to do something just to try or to challenge yourself, people are starting to think, oh, it's the way people are working right there, or it's the way to do something. Or maybe I saw that a lot on Experience Point or on Discord. Like people are like, yeah, but it's not going to be 100% procedural, you know, and it's kind of the trend right now. And most of the time I'm trying to chill people out. Like I honestly, I never in my entire career hire anyone because they were like so much powerful in that software or like with that tool. Oh yeah, oh it's crazy. There is no modeling. Just come work with us. No, the last person I just hired was just like a great artist. It was just a great artist with like an amazing technical and artistic knowledge, and that person barely touched designer, was proficient in Painter, but mostly ZBrush. And we just discussed about like rhythm, shape language, color, and that person was like nailing it. And his ramp up on designer was like a matter of weeks. In like 2 weeks, he was like one of the best artists I know inside designer. So for me, it's not a problem of like, are you going to impress with something like 100% procedural or something like that? It's like, are you just like, you know, understanding the context and why you are doing stuff? And are you going to be useful inside a team? That's all that matters, you know.
When you're having these conversations, this is what I've noticed a lot when I'm doing the mentoring. When you ask the why, like why are you doing this? Why are you making it? A lot of the time I've met with and they're kind of this, they're dumbfounded, and I'm like, yeah, you need to. There's got to be a reason behind making this. Like, you know, especially if you're like not in the industry yet and you're trying to get in. I'm like, okay, why are you making this like stylized material or piece or environment? And it's like, oh, well, just because. I'm like, oh, do you want to work at Blizzard? Not really. No, I want to work at Ubisoft. Like, I want to work on a division. I'm like, okay, like maybe you should be gearing your work towards that. And like that why and why someone makes art and makes portfolio art is very interesting. How often recently, I'd say like 8 out of 10 of the people I'm mentoring, and I get it, like they're the ones who need mentoring, need help, and that's why they don't have these answers maybe. But I'm finding more and more now, like, why are you making this piece? I don't know, I just feel like I should. Like, and it's kind of like, well, if you don't have your why, like you don't have any reason to do anything. Like you just do it because, and it's like, that's what I found a lot, especially like, you know, in the Discords, you know, why are you making this piece? I don't know, like just this time. And then you like you dig a little bit, you scratch the surface and go, well, where do you want to work? And you find out it's completely opposite to what they're doing, and you're like, you need to gear yourself a little bit more towards that, maybe.
Yeah, I don't think it's just that, but I saw that as well, like many years ago, like 10 years ago in Polycons, and now I think in with ArtStation, it's like even more increased. We have access to like so much images, like high quality images, high quality portfolio, high quality pieces that you know. Basically, I'm like everyone. I'm seeing like something stylized, very cool, and I'm like, oh, I want to do something stylized because I'm like feeling something good when I'm like looking at that. And the same goes with something realistic, but as you said, you have to ask yourself, did you really want to do that? Did you are going to learn something from it or not? obviously sometimes if it is just practice, it could be cool as well. But I really feel that most of the time on Discord, for example, when I'm like giving feedback, I'm like feeling that people feel the need to always produce something for their portfolio. And I don't think it's like very healthy for anyone. Like it's the same for me, for everyone, because you have to enjoy the process as well. Sometimes just do something for yourself, just to practice, and not in the mindset of like putting it inside your art station. Because most of the time, what I saw, it's like people are kind of like blinded by that. They are like, oh, I saw something very cool with like 100% procedural stuff, and I need to do something similar. And like you said, did you really need to do that? It's like, what do you want to do? You want to be a character artist. So no, I don't think you need to like practice this kind of skill. But I think it's something that, and I understand there is a lot of stress coming from like going inside a studio you like or getting inside the industry. And again, seeing the portfolio of other people can be a bit like losing you sometime. For what I saw, for example, it's why most of the time I'm like, I think I'm going on ArtStation maybe once a month or something like that. It's like it's very rare, because if I'm like on it, I'm just like looking at all the images all day, and I'm not working or doing anything myself. And at least for me, it's like that. It's really
well, now you're more experienced. So, as being a more experienced artist, this might be. I'm just curious on this front. Do you find it easier to not like? So, for example, for me, for the longest time, everything I did was like for a reason. I want to work at this studio, so I want to practice this skill. I want to practice. I want to learn this pipeline, so I want to practice that. And more recently, like, so for example, that abstract thing that went out, like, it's kind of like a nothing piece, but it's like there was no reason other than I was really interested in the idea of like visual metaphors. I'm like, okay, like this serves no purpose to me getting furthering my career. This is purely a for me thing. But it's only been recently I have felt comfortable to do that. Because, like, you know, when you're trying to get into the industry, yeah, you do have to work pretty hard and like put some extra time in and do a few things you maybe don't want to do just to tick boxes. But when you're like in the industry, I think there comes a point where, like, at least this is what I think you need to go through, is where you're comfortable enough to be like, okay, I can just do art for me. And maybe if you want to change studio, or if you wanted to like get promotion or something, you might look to further your skill set. But it's only been now I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to do this, like this idea, which is completely useless to my career. It doesn't affect my career whatsoever. It's just interesting to me. And it's only now I'm able to feel like I can do that. Did you feel a point during your career where you kind of, you're like, okay, I don't need to prove myself. I don't need to, although you do always want to get better as an artist. I get that. Time software moves, software changes. But did you get to a point where you're like, I could just make this for me? And if people don't like it, cool, it doesn't matter, because this was for me. Have you reached that point? Have you felt that point? Like, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I totally see your point. I totally feel you. I think maybe on like, I don't remember exactly the day, but on like 2017 or 16 on Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I was just like so happy with what I was working on, like on a daily basis. I didn't feel the need of like, okay, like every night, every day, every weekend when I have like some free time, I need to try to learn a new skill and to apply it like every week, because I'm like losing my time when I'm not doing something. I think on Odyssey it was like that because I was finally becoming a full-time texture artist, and I was just like very happy at work. So I still kept like doing stuff on my side, but it was like most of the time, oh, maybe I could have fun, like you said, have fun with something experimental. Like I remember that time I was drawing because I love drawing. I'm like always drawing when I have like 5 minutes, like doodling nothing. And I was like, when I'm like drawing, I'm always doing primitive shapes. And in Photoshop, I would do it that way. And because Substance Designer is a nodal Photoshop, maybe I can like reproduce it and have something interesting. And just because of that, I was starting to like test some stuff. I was not doing it to do an art piece or something, and I end up with a face. And I was like, maybe I could do a bust or something like the body, and that's how I did my. I did a procedural. It's not procedural at all, but like something in designer, like a woman with a
the gold thing,
an animal. Yeah, and so basically I end up with something I was like quite happy with, and I was like, my colleagues were like, maybe you need to share it because you discover some stuff with perspective and all of that. But the point is that I was doing it just for me. It was very selfish, you know. And most of the time, I'm doing stuff like that, except if it's something like I'm paid for, like for Assassin's Creed, for Immortals, for Adobe. Most of the time, I'm just doing stuff on my side. Sometimes doodling. Sometimes I'm like doing sculpting, even with clay in reality. But I'm not sharing it all the time because I'm doing it to have fun, and sometimes I'm happy enough to say, oh, maybe people will like it or not. But I think it's important, like you said, to reach that point where you feel comfortable to do stuff for yourself and not just always for your career. Obviously, it's different for everyone, and everyone can feel things in a different way. But for example, right now, I'm like playing inside the Unreal 5 just to have fun like a child, and I'm like doing complete garbage with ZBrush and stuff like that. But I don't think I will ever like finish this stuff. It is going to be like my previous stuff, just to play with something and get rid of it. So
there was a couple of guys at one of the Raw was helping me from Sony. He was like, I was trying to get like better ZBrush, and he was like, you need to stop. Like it's really heavy. So try and just scoop something for an evening and then delete it. Don't even save it. Like finish your piece and be done with it, and don't feel the need. Because as soon as you save it, it's like you're obligated to that now. And like, and then I was showing him stuff. It's like you're going too far. Like you're detailing out and doing all the like the stuff that makes it sexy for social media. Just focus on macro forms. And as soon as you got it done, just delete it. Don't save it. And I did that for a couple of weeks. And the first couple of weeks, I was like I hated it. Because I had a couple of rocks or like cliff face I was making where I was like, I really liked it. I spent like an evening on it, and just not saving it was one of the hardest things I've had to do. And then after a week or so of it, it's like you become, you get the muscle memory down, and you get in a habit of being able to produce the shapes far quicker. But I do remember just being like, I'm so like attached to everything being either complete or being shown to the world or being for someone else or for a purpose, and like just making that stuff and doing that stuff just for you, and it's for your eyes only. There's something to be said for it. There's a guy in a Discord I hang out in, character artist, who is he's a really interesting dude. Like there's always side art stuff. He does like character illustration, like life drawing, life drawing sketches, photography. He's a show person. It's for him, and he doesn't feel the need to show the world. And I'm like, I admire it. I'm like, that's a level of self-confidence, which I think most of us aspire to be able to just make the art purely for you, and you don't need like validation of the world or social media or ArtStation to justify the art, justify the time. Like, and I find that, it's that kind of, I don't need to shout about what I'm doing. I know I'm doing my work. I'm going to chug along and do my work just fine. I know I'm okay. I don't need to shout about what I'm doing. And I just have a lot of admiration for that kind of mindset. And it's that time with ZBrush when I was trying to do scoop stuff, I'm like, I was getting a glimpse. Like, I'm still very like, need to do stuff for purpose. I got a glimpse into it. I was like, damn, there is a level of like satisfaction to it where it's like, only I saw this, and I didn't need someone to give me 10 likes on Twitter to make me feel like I did, it was worth my time. Is it interesting?
At the same time, obviously, it depends on people. I worked with people that were like very driven by that, by sharing and having like feedback and likes. And for me, it makes sense. We are doing art to be happy, and if it makes you happy to share it and have feedback about that, it's okay. It really depends. I think, are you an extrovert or an introvert as well? Maybe I think we can dive into that for like hours, but back to the thing to like do something and just like delete it to like suppress it. I think it's like a very good mindset to practice. It's a very classical art stuff. I remember like, I don't know, 15 years ago when I was in art school, I was shocked by my first sculpting lesson. That was modelage. So it was not sculpting, it was with clay, you know. So trying to do something. And it was basically you start at 8 a.m. and at like 6 p.m. at the end of the day, you are like destroying your stuff and bringing it to the box of clay.
Yeah.
So the mindset was for me it was very crazy 15 years ago. I was like, yeah, but I did something, I'm like happy with it. But the idea was not to do something, it was to practice, you know, like muscle memory, to train your eyes, and to also get rid of the feeling that that thing you did is so precious that it's like more important than the process itself.
Yeah.
And I think it's something you can find if you are even doing it virtually inside Designer or ZBrush. You just practice with not the mindset of sharing it. So it doesn't mean that you are not sharing it at the end if you are happy with it, but remove it that from your mind. At least for me, it's like removing a lot of pressure. For me, I'm like, when I'm doing something, I'm just doing something for me. I'm sharing it with friends. We have like a private discourse with friends and colleagues, and we are like sharing it like everyone, and we are like sharing it to like cheer ourselves up. But mostly, I don't know if like I'm going to share that stuff outside of there, or maybe sometimes I'm just like keeping stuff for me because I just enjoy the process.
Yeah.
And I think it's something when you like kind of integrate that in your like mind, you are less stressed when you are working on something for a production, you know, or for your portfolio, because you are a little less afraid of making mistake. At least for me, obviously it's depending on the people.
No, that makes perfect sense. And actually, just speaking, like we spoke a bit about career and stuff. There's actually something about your career. I've been wanting to talk to somebody like you about this because it's an interesting phenomenon. We talk about like, you know, job satisfaction and all this sort of stuff. You've been you're at Ubisoft for over a decade now. Like, there's two types of people I've seen in this industry. There's those who like they get to a studio and they're super happy and they're there for a long time, and you get some people who they studio hoppers. They finish their contract and they move. They finish the contract, they move. Finish the production, they move. And like obviously neither's good or bad. Like it's just that's the way some people live. For you, you've recently left Ubisoft and you've joined Eidios. Like, you've been, like I said, you've been in Ubisoft for a decade, you've been working on Assassin's Creed for over a decade. Why now? What's the thing that's made you go, right, I'm ready to move, I'm ready to for a challenge? What is that? Because obviously, like, you know, you it must be a great studio, you've been there for as long as you have. What's going through your head during that?
Yeah, it was definitely like a nice position, a nice team, and like the project that we are coming in. When I left, I just say that to the HR and my art director. I was like, you know, the project that are coming in the studio, I would have killed to work on that. Like, I'm in the game industry for those projects right now, but I was like, when the COVID strike, it was exactly the same time I was like at my 10 years milestone. And I think when you are like reaching a 5 years or 10-year milestone, sometimes you are like thinking a bit more about things in life. It was also the time my daughter was born. She was very little. So I was asking myself a lot of questions, like life question. And I was like, maybe I could try new challenges or new stuff just to see, you know. And exactly the same time, I think the same week, a very cool company just reached out to me, and I was like, yeah, maybe it's a cool idea. I was very excited by their stuff, so I start like taking a look outside, like what was like going on. I was not really convinced to move because again, I was really cool where I was. the team is really cool right there. But I just heard a rumor about a project at Eidios, contacting them, and honestly, I just like fell in love with their stuff, and I was like, okay, I think it's a good time to move. It's a good situation. The perk and all of that, all the like the way I'm working, I didn't move like so I don't have my daughter to move, my wife to lose her job and stuff like that. So it was like a very great deal for me, like a golden deal to try new stuff. And the team I just fall into is like amazing environment artists. Like I'm like so bad next to them. It's like basically I don't know anything. They are like giant environment artists, and I'm like, do you know you can do that with a slope blur? So
No,
basically,
no. I know you're too good to be thrown around. Oh, slope blur advice. Slope blur clouds too. That's what you need.
Yeah, it's my boolean, inside designer. But yeah, basically it was I think at every maybe ends of project I add that little voice. Okay, did you want to move or not? And honestly, I think a few years ago at the end of Assassin's Creed Syndicate, I was really like eager to move because of the crunch and all of that. It was a very tough production for everyone. And I was like, okay, I want to move to be a material artist. I want to move to work on something procedural because I wanted to like deep dive into designer full time and to do something realistic, but with a bit of like, idealization, like on The Order or maybe Horizon Zero Dawn. And it's exactly what they like gave to me at the time at the studio. So I was like, there is no reason to move. I just want to do that. And like last summer when I just reached my 10 years milestone, like I said, I was like, I can stay here because I'm really good, but maybe there is something better with big opportunity right there. So I just took a look, and obviously, yes, something crazy was waiting for me. So yeah, that was.
So
It's
it's
not
kind of
really
like
original.
there's a lot of like almost the stars aligning, right? Like it sounds like obviously you're reaching that 10-year milestone. COVID hit, your daughter's born. It's like okay, like it's if there's a time for change, this is kind of it.
Yeah,
And then, like you said,
that.
you just uncovered a stone where you're like, okay, this is a project I fucking love. It's a sign.
Yeah, it's that. You know how it is in life. It's like it doesn't mean that you can't move when you want. It is just that sometimes it's easier than other time. When you are like at the end of a project or when life is striking you sometime. So yeah, it was a time like that.
Okay. So all of that being said, and this is something that I've had to deal with myself, is what's going through your head like when it's like, okay, you're a lead at Ubisoft, one of the biggest studios on the planet. You're now a senior. So some people from the outside looking in, they go, well, that's a step backwards. You was a lead and now you're a senior. What's going through your head? Like, is it like, because I mean, job titles could be an incredibly destructive thing to someone's like kind of headspace when they're looking at their career. Like I said, I went through this. For you, what's, does it make a difference? It's just literally some words. It don't, like, did it enter your like thought process when you're talking to Eidios or like, oh, I want to be a senior, that's bad? Or is it just, no, project I go there?
I think it's really subjective, but I never made that much fluff of like someone being a confirmed senior or like an expert artist, because I worked with experts that didn't know shit about like how to bake something properly, things some junior could do like straight out of school. So and I think in my mind, at least, it applied as well to me. I really feel that I'm some kind of experienced artist, so I would say more like a confirm or something like that. At Ubisoft, it was named senior. I was really happy and excited to become a lead, but I learned that very at the beginning of my career. Becoming a lead is not like just like an achievement or the end of your career, and you can go right there. You can always take a step back, according to some like people, way to see the career and stuff like that. But it's just like a matter of you want to go back to production or you want to help in a different way. For me, it all comes down to I just became lead to help more the team. I was already doing that on Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I was responsible of the architectural mandate in terms of material. So I was helping the outsourcing, the guy inside the team to be able to stay in memory and do good breakdown and share artistic best practices and things like that. So I did the same on Immortals, and they proposed me to move to that lead level because sometimes some people they just understand that it's sad, but there is some people that just take feedback from people higher in the hierarchy.
Yeah.
It's sad, but it's like that. But at the end, inside my team, we were all senior, and on Immortals, I was at least producing 60-70% of my time. I was like doing the task and the macro plan every morning, doing like checking people every morning, and then producing like everyone. So maybe I was not like a lead per se because I was not like doing only Excel things.
Yeah.
But that's why for me it makes sense to go inside a senior position because it is what I am. I would say.
Yeah.
I know that for some people poke me when I said, "Hey, I'm going to be a senior texture artist." At Eidios, they were like, "Yeah, but dude, you're a lead. Don't you want to become an art director or something like that?" I think a career is very long.
Yeah.
And you just have to do what you love right now.
Yeah.
I mean, in a few months, maybe, or in a few years, I will become a lead, or I will become an art director. Or if I'm really sad, I will become a producer or something like that. But it really depends. And life is an adventure. And no, I'm kidding. I love producers. But
yeah, of course you do. Yeah, and it says every artist, they love their producers.
No kidding. I was very lucky at Ubisoft Quebec. I only had great producer that was very cool, and I was doing my own planning even on Odyssey, and they were very cool with that. As long as you delivers, they didn't care how much time it took or how did you get there. Are you delivering in 1 year and 6 months? It's okay. And so for me, it's the best way to work. It's like you let people be autonomous and all of that, but you know that. And so yeah. Back to your question, for me, it's obviously there is a lot of change because I have a lead right now, even 2 leads, and they are like great people. But the biggest change for me is that I don't have anymore the team I was working with, and I didn't enjoy working with them because I was their lead. It was just because they were like great people, great damn artists you really like love working with great ideas and in solution and all that. So it's the only change for me, I would say.
Dude, I think that's a perfect point to finish up on, because I think that's something very important for people to do. Is like, I think there is a bit of a linear mindset with our industry, and I get why, because it is a pretty straight ladder. Junior, mid, senior, lead, and then you got all the principals and art directors and all that shit in there. But the fact, I think it's a good point to finish on, in that the lead isn't a one-way door. It's not like you go through and the door slams behind you and that's that part of your career over. Especially since, as well, like I said, a lead's a very different job to a production artist. Like, it's almost actually more like a sidestep than a progression. Like, it's like progress is like junior, mid, senior, but they're all doing the same job, just a higher level competency. Whereas a lead is almost like, okay, this is a different job. This is not my production art job. I mean, I know you said you would do production art as well, but for most leads, it's a sidestep into management. And I think that is a mindset, though. They think it's the next step on a ladder rather than being a different ladder, which is interesting, which is not something spoken about in life, actually.
And obviously, and it's something that was very important for me, and I was really happy they just let me do it that way. It's that every lead is going to be different. So it's going to be depending on the background you have. I was lucky. I mostly had just great leads, art leads in my career, and everyone was different. Some of my leads, they were like producing as much as me, even more when they have like less time than me. That was crazy. They were like just machine. Some were just like doing managing tasks in Jira and all of that. And everything can work. It's just really a matter of context, how you want to teach, to share, and all of that. But for me, the best talk and the best breakdown about being a lead, and I was happy because it appears when I became a lead, it came from Erica Pinto, the lead animator at Santa Monica. She just did like an amazing breakdown of what are like the mission of a lead. And at the end, if you take a look at it, it's like mostly the mission of like being a good artist in your team, being a good person. Obviously, you are going to have a bit more responsibility and like weight in terms of decision. But for me, it was like mind-opening to see something that clear in her talk. And it's like helping people, teaching people stuff, being ahead of like solution and like the kind of trouble that can happen in production. And for me, it's as well the definition of a senior artist.
Yeah.
So that's why for me, it makes a lot of sense to go back and forth.
That sounds perfect, dude. We're gonna have to wrap up. I've already said we've got over the 60-minute mark, and I've taken enough of your lunch. Well, is this your lunch break? This is, isn't it?
Yeah, it's coming. Yeah.
Sweet. So, I mean, dude, I really appreciate taking the time to have a chat. I've been wanting to speak to you for a long time. It's still longer than I expected to get you on, but I'm glad we persevered through and we made it happen. As usual, everyone listening, remember to, like, share, follow, subscribe. The more that the podcast gets shared, the more it can help people get some really useful information that people like Vincent have to share. But dude, we're going to wrap up. Thank you so much. And everyone, I'll catch you in 2 weeks.